Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of you, and peace out to the rest of you. Hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. So it turns out that the lady that turned down the Cheesecake Factory was doing skits. And that the lady that went to Antoine's, well, there's no evidence that there was ever anybody with her, but there's evidence she was by herself. Crimson Cure covered that. So what I will say to you is, I'll tell you this. We should actually act like we don't know that it's a skit. It's good to know, but we should also act like we don't know. The fact that it's a skit is why she actually did not raise her voice at him and just throw a damn fit. She still was stereotypical. When you court a beautiful woman, because see, I get courted. Yeah, that attitude, that was still there. And that was the reason I didn't think it was a skit in the beginning. That's exactly how overly entitled sisterin talk. Over enunciating the T's for an American accent. I mean, a T is a T in a word, but we know that for Americans, the T's in the middle of words become D's in their pronunciation. So, and I learned to hear this when I came here to Saudi, because the Saudis would make jokes about the differences between the British pronunciation and the Americans' pronunciation. They would say, who's going to get that right? And I would tell them, well, you probably want to listen to Australians and South Africans if you want the best pronunciation. Betty bought a bucket of butter, but the butter that Betty bought was bitter butter. And then, the Americans would say, Betty bought a bucket of butter, but the butter that Betty bought was bitter. So the T's become D's amongst us. And so when I hear an American woman exaggerate the T's in the middle of words, I get courted. See, you're going to support me. He is supporting me 100%. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's that attitude. You talking down. You trying to sun somebody. And that's not okay. That was why I believed it. And it turns out that was a skit. We should know it's a skit, and we should act like we don't know it's a skit, and here's why. I want you to imagine that a man actually embarrasses himself, or someone embarrasses a man. And then he comes out and says it's a skit. Who's going to believe it? Remember the man at the restaurant in LA that said he was just waiting for his person? He had the flowers and everything. He has content. He does comedy. Evidence was that was another skit. Except this time there were no laughs. He didn't seem to be joking in this one, but he's done comedy in other tapes or other uploads of his, with evidence of it being a skit. Nobody said it was a skit. That's because it was a man talking about how he gets stood up. So therefore that was embarrassing to him, and therefore we were to believe right off the bat that no, that's real, because it's embarrassing to him. So you better not try to cast doubt on this. No, he got played. That's the way we are. That's our people. And to be honest with you, I've seen how when you got black men by themselves, like in Morehouse, a lot of the negativity goes out the window. To be honest with you, some of the most positive experiences I had with black men were there. Second most positive experiences were in Atlanta in general. Those are some of the most positive experiences I had with black men. What's the reason? Well, the ladies were nearby. They were across the street at the nearby campus. But by the same token, they weren't there in the dorms with us a lot of times. Rarely in the classrooms. It just didn't do any good trying to show off. And then there was something else that happened too. I would see how sometimes some of these pseudo-intellectuals, and we had them, elitist pseudo-intellectuals at Morehouse, they're there. It's Morehouse. It's going to attract that, just like it's going to attract guys that are only interested in other guys because of the reputation. It doesn't have to be true. Eventually, it becomes true because of the reputation. Well, you had the pseudo-intellectual, the stereotypical Morehouse man that you could always tell from others, but you could not tell much. Leading to the saying, you can tell a Morehouse man, but you can't tell him much. You'd have some of those pseudo-intellectuals. And if there was ever an event in the MLK Chapel and it was for Spelman and Morehouse together, these guys that they were on the stage and had to talk, they try to one-up each other because, you know, they want to dominate each other in front of the Spelmanites. And that's where regular civility and diplomacy will go out the window. I remember one time when one guy showed respect for another guy on the stage. They were talking about something. He showed respect for another guy on the stage. And both were kind of pseudo-intellectual, but one of them, I remember he had a white mom. Didn't know his dad. And here he was getting his black experience. And he said, I'm sure that he spoke a little bit. He said, but I'm sure that he knows more about this than I do. And he referred to the gentleman on his left, another pseudo-intellectual. And he was being polite and respectful in this case, letting that man say more because he expected this man to know more. And that man said, well, you know, and the other guy who was given the respect spoke about himself in the third person and said, yeah, well, you know, let blank speak for blank. That's what blank said about himself, trying to one up this dude. And there was some niggas in the audience. Ooh, like he really did something. All he did was show that he doesn't know respect when he sees it. He doesn't know deference when he sees it. That's not something that we get from each other normally. And I still blame that dude. I'm not even going to blame the Spelmanites just because they attended. I'm not going to blame them for that. He was trying to show off in front of them. I'm not blaming the Spelmanites because they happened to be there to listen to this issue, this lecture. I'm going to blame blank because he wanted to show off. Now, he's supposedly above that stuff, but he wasn't. But you know, we get a lot of negativity from the hyenocracy. And I want to state that we should go ahead and we have to know how to give it back. Not go out of your way to give it back, but we have to know how to give it back in such a way that you don't invite more of it. Because see, when you don't give it back, you just invite more. And that's what this is. You don't give this back, you invite more of this. You're like, it doesn't stop. So don't act like you know it's a skit. Act like you don't know it's a skit. No, bruh. No, bro, she was out of pocket, but you still kept her voice low for that dude because he ain't black. You have to do this. With each other, we can act like we know it's a skit. It's kind of like black folks' relationship with Palestinians in the wake of this stepped up violence. In actuality, it was a retaliation for something that Israel had done a few weeks or a month before, and it was not covered in the news. We don't know about it. But the thing is, now when Palestinians start saying, where are you black folks in this? See, with each other, we can say to each other, we can look at each other and say, man, them Israelis are doing the Palestinians wrong, boy. They some animals for that. And that's what you should call them. Animals. The Palestinians are right in this particular struggle. But because Palestinians still don't fully understand pro-blackness, even as much as their religion would demand it in the context of us having been oppressed before, you got to act like you don't know. Like, even though you understand who's right, sometimes you still got to let that party not know that you know they right, because they wouldn't understand if the situations were reversed and you were right. They wouldn't get it. They look up to Zaddy more than we do. Believe that. And that's real. Ask a black Palestinian about that. You know how they sometimes if the kids start making jokes about a black person, you know how they get their kids to stop? And the first thing is, where did the kids learn that from? But you know how they get their kids to stop? That's not nice. Don't do that, or else God's going to turn you that same way. So God's going to punish them by making them black or turn them darker. Man, fit the guck out my face with that short bit. If that were the case, I was a kid, I would have been made fun of everybody darker than me. Then going into the church and be like, God, ain't you supposed to turn me darker yet? This is as a kid, not now as an adult. But as a kid, I would have done that. I'm like, God, I've been sitting up and making jokes. When you gonna make me darker? So because they still have this in their culture, you may have to act to them like, if they come and say, well, where's your support? You may have to say to them, where's ours? I mean, y'all hold your own nuts. You got this. And if you're going to support them for real, you do it in a way they don't know it was you, something anonymous. That's how you got to be with these folks too. See, there are times when you need to know information, but there are times when sometimes even for the moral benefit of the one that's wrong, you got to act like you don't know. But that's not really what it's about. A lot of times it's really just about you. For your own benefit, you got to act like you don't know. That's better for you and for the one that is right in a particular context, but still ain't fully got it. Chris Rock is said to have hollered at Jada. Now, you know, Jada said that she said to him, we're not getting a divorce. And then he apologized, and that was the end of that. So she actually kind of let him off the hook easily. But Jada has lied before about her entanglement. She seems to have been lying about Tupac because he didn't mention a whole lot about her. She and it seems like they were friends. Don't get me wrong. But while it seems as though they were friends, he didn't describe her as his soulmate. He didn't do that. And then it goes on, it goes further. The evidence is that she's exaggerating stuff. And so now she turns around after she clearly lied about August Alsina before she came clean. And after she clearly lied and said that Will Smith planned her 40th birthday all about him and his ego. That ain't true. No, that ain't true. That's not it. He planned it for 3 years. You don't do that for 3 years for somebody else. We didn't know about it till he said something about it. He said, I planned this, I planned this, I planned this, and she shot me down. And you know what? She was right. She wasn't right. She couldn't understand him doing it for anybody else because she wouldn't. So she projected onto him, and he sat up there and took the blame, internalized it, and said, you know what? She convinced himself that she was right about his motives. And he was wrong about his own motives, his own reason, his own intention. So now she thinks she can trick everybody. So you know what? Even though she kind of let Chris Rock off the hook easy, and she may not be lying about that, we should just assume she is, because that's what war means. I mean, why the hell would she tell the truth? She has to sit up and say something about somebody. I didn't tell Will Smith to slap Chris. Oh boy. It makes me wonder what really happened between her and Chris. Did he think they were getting a divorce? And she said, no, we're not. But, you know, we can have fun, skip the dating and all that other stuff. We can do that. And whether he took her up on that or not, she's afraid he's going to come up and say that she said that. So she comes out. You have to assume the worst, because this is Jada. She done already shown the worst. So even fighting a Cold War that you're not interested in fighting still may necessitate understanding certain potentials and possibilities, while not letting on that you are aware of it, and even understanding certain realities, but still not letting on that you know of the potentials or the realities so that you can publicly assume the worst. Because that's what's been done to you. You've already shown that you can give people the benefit of the doubt, not assume the worst. Have positive environments amongst yourself. You've already shown this. State of Morehouse was one such example. Pseudo-intellectuals or anybody else really trying to show off, really, they only resorted to doing that in front of the women. If they were really that bad, they just hang out in Spelman's campus. That's what happened. You know, my initial major, I wanted to go into education for the beginning. I really did. They didn't offer it at Morehouse. And I didn't go into that because it was on Spelman's campus. I learned before I ever became a college student to respect women's space and give them boundaries. And I learned it so much so that I actually didn't go into my first major, my first choice. And the thing is, the one that advised me to not take a major that would have necessitated me taking a lot of classes at Spelman, the one that gave me that advice was right. That. Yeah. That's what I learned. And that's because for the most part, we were already at war and I didn't know it. Subconsciously, the one advising me knew it. Said to me, Black, you can't take classes there at Spelman that often. You can't even pick a major like that. You're not going to be treated fairly. She said to me, the professors there are not going to treat you fairly. They're going to be harder on you because you're a guy. And even if that's your normal major and that's your calling, and there are other guys that are doing the same thing, you will be singled out. And boy, was that advisor right, because in 2001, I was told pretty much the same thing. So I know what I'm talking about when I tell you about this war. Remember, I've been saying what you had to deal with, what you faced. Now, the ill treatment, being used, all this disrespect that you're now facing, gentlemen, was reserved at one point. I think the contempt was always there, but the disrespect was reserved at one point for a few of us. I saw a skit on Facebook. Robert Campbell sent that. Shout out to him. Assalamu alaikum, brother. I can't say this was a skit. This was actually, a scene was being filmed where a man was talking to a lady and she said something to him and he stood up and he said, I just lost my brother. And she stood up and said, who are you talking to like this? And slapped him and knocked him over. Slapped his glasses off. And then somebody else steps into the frame at the same time that another voice says, cut. The whole time they were filming a scene, they were actors. She wasn't supposed to really hit him, and she hit him. And I knew exactly what the hell that was. See, one of the things that happens, and we oftentimes don't realize this, but it's still true, is that when you're a light-skinned brother, you can't raise your voice that easily. I mean, you're going to be tested to see if you have that mettle and that nerve to do it, to have the boundaries and set the boundaries. But when you set boundaries or you enforce the boundaries, you're going to be struck for it before another brother would. And they'll talk about the other brother, blackity black this, then the other. They'll do that. You a light-skinned brother, they will hit you. They will swing on you. It's insane. But like I said, it's war. And sometimes you have to know about something and still not admit to what you know. Sometimes it's going to involve the innocence of a particular thing. Your opponent's innocence for something that they didn't do. You know they didn't do it, but you don't even let anybody know you know they didn't do it. I wish I had better news. I wish it wasn't war, but it is. So I hope that what I said helps. Thank you for listening. As always, Black Heart, Black Mind, Black Out. Assalamu alaikum, and black heterosexual non-select male power just because they don't like it. Black patriarchy until extinction of Judgment Day. Thank you for flying again with me on Jet Black Airways, where Jet Black is also a verb. Keep jetting black with me until the wings and the wheels fall off. Gender, justice, forever.